everyone for giving us the opportunity to come in and speak with your team here. My name is Sean Murray. I'm the Vice President of Business Development for Ball Insurance. My background is I've been doing commercial insurance for 15 years. I'm a Canadian risk manager. I have declination, so I do know a little bit about what I'm talking about when it comes to business insurance and cyber, particularly because it has been a very hot topic over the last few years as the claims begin to rise and the exposure begins to rise for small and medium-sized enterprise. Stephanie Patlin, I'll let you do
out of the loop. My name is Stephanie Patlin. I've been with Balds for just over a year now. I've been with insurance for 5 years, and just through the presentations that I've done, I just got organized through Tanya, one of your guys' co-workers, and I've just come to realize a lot of people aren't aware of the importance of cyber. So that's why we came to decide, well, maybe this might be a good information session for people just to have an idea, whether for you guys yourselves as realtors or when you come in contact with clients. I know you guys, I don't know if you sell commercial or not, but some of your clients are looking, they might be self-employed or business owners. So if they ever ask you questions, because they always ask realtors everything, where do I go for the A, B, C, D, E, all the way to Z, right? So I just thought it was a good time to maybe go over some of that and then, add to your guys' toolbox if it's not something specific for individual.
Stephanie, there's a chat and there you can see people putting in chats. So what we can do is take a look at the questions. If they're quick, I'll answer them as they come up. If not, maybe we'll save them to the end. Two questions.
It's
Can't hear you at all. Okay, so
that's not good.
Is there here's the speaker.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah, you probably have the phone.
Maybe I'll stand here.
That's good thinking for you now.
Is it better now? Okay, I see one thumbs up.
Okay. There.
All right, so I'll speak a little louder. Normally, that's not a problem for me, I will admit. So what I want to do is I'm just kind of going to go over some high level why questions about why buy cyber liability, what is cyber liability, what are your exposures, and what can you purchase. And I'm going to try and keep it as high level as possible because this topic can get very specific, but we'll keep it very general and I can answer any questions. So feel free to raise your hand or put something in the chat there and we'll try to answer your questions as best as possible. If there's anything that I can't answer for you here, I'll certainly take it down and get back to you individually later. So with that, I guess I'll start the presentation. First of all, here it is. Okay, of course, when she leaves, everything doesn't work.
I can get her. I know where she lives.
There we go. So first, some key facts about cyber. First fact, breaches are bigger and more costly than ever. So this is becoming a much larger problem than it was in the past. Obviously, everything we do is digital. Everything connects to the internet now from your fridge to your cell phone, which is creating a larger exposure environment for small businesses, personal individuals, and large companies. So with the level of sophistication as well as also bringing on the exposure, and these claims are getting larger and larger and larger. Common misconception is that hackers only go after large businesses. That couldn't be further from the truth. You will hear about large businesses being hacked because that's what makes the media. But in general, everything from small one and two person mom and pop shops to multinational companies are targeted. And the reason being is because it is very cost effective for a hacker to target millions of people in one cyber event. So the misconception that I'm just small and I have all of my data on some cloud with applied rate or so with Amazon Web Services, I'm fine, all the security. That is not the truth. So don't be lulled into that sense of false security. Where are your exposures coming from? All organizations are susceptible to both internal and external threats. So internal threats can be anything from people acting maliciously inside your own organization to just mistakes like leaving my laptop here by accident. That creates an internal exposure for the company. And then we have our external threats. So, you know, you have anywhere from government actors to large criminal organizations to just small little cyber criminals in their basement, mom's basement. So the exposures can come everywhere from internal to external. So when we look at insurance, it's typical to your standard property office policy, like you would have a Keller Williams here. There's generally a first party exposures, which are anything to do with your own property, something that's impacting you, impacting the business, we'll say, versus third party exposures, which is exposures coming in from outside stakeholders or customers or just through third parties. So the types of coverages, types of exposures that you can face on the first party side would include forensic expenses. So you get hacked, you have no longer able to get on your computer anymore, you can't access your files anymore, while you generally have to hire a forensic person to come in, try and find out where your data went, reconstitute everything and bring it back to what you had before, or at least trying to access and put together cobble bits of it that were lost, because sometimes it can be lost for good. Notification, so there's requirements, and we'll get to this a little bit further on in the presentation, but there's specific requirements that the government puts on you through legislation that requires you to provide notification to any customers or employees if you have suffered a breach. Then we get into credit monitoring. So there is a requirement to monitor credit for any customers that you have breached their data through a cyber incident. There's regulatory fines, there's public relations expenses, because anytime a business suffers a loss like this and it becomes public, there is some negative connotations. So there's a public relations aspect of it that can be involved into it. Biggest one though, ransom payments and cyber extortion. This is where we see the majority of the claims. So somebody basically gets into your system, locks you completely out, and says, pay me 10,000 Bitcoin and I'll release all your information. So insurance companies can pay ransomware. They do have a process by which they manage those types of claims, but the ransomware payments can be part of the exposure. And then financial fraud, this is kind of in the same vein, but a little bit different. Your phishing payments would generally be more so basically somebody frauding you into giving them money. So, hey, I'm your so-and-so from long lost cousin from here, click this link to send me a donation of X amount of dollars. So those are the two largest sources of claims from a cyber perspective in the ransom and the phishing activities. Third-party exposures, this is really where it comes back to allowing data that you are hosting, confidential data that gets out to the world through a hack. So this is where you are legally liable under multiple legislations and requirements within those legislations. So you have class action lawsuits, you have payment card fraud expenses, identity theft lawsuits, loss of third-party intellectual property or confidential corporate information. So, you know, you guys house important information about maybe deals that are going on. If that gets out and then causes a financial loss for your customer, they can sue you. So these are the types of exposures that are involved in the third-party aspect of cyber. You have PCI fines, which are more so to do with your point of sale systems, not as applicable in your group, but for any type of retail organization, those can be quite high fines and penalties. Network disruptions, so people reliant on your services that you provide to do business, and your system network goes down and they can no longer access what they need to access. That's a potential for a legal lawsuit on your behalf. And then negligent transmission of computer viruses or malicious code. So like the big hack on Target, which was about 5 years ago, actually didn't occur from Target's own systems. It was an HVAC contractor that was there doing work at one of the stores. The hacker was able to get in through the HVAC contractor systems, which were connected to Target systems, and that's how a multi-million-dollar breach occurred. So it's not even just your system. So that's why, you know, me coming here, sending an email to you is better. You should never have anybody come and be able to, you know, stick a thumb drive in your computers or have access to your computers like that. Because like I said, I could be completely unaware of something that's hiding in my systems that's just waiting for an opportunity to get into your systems. So there's some brief overview on what type of exposures. And then the third one I'll mention is the regulatory. And this is the teeth behind your requirements if you do suffer a breach, or how you can even communicate, marketing materials to third parties through specific privacy and protection regulations. So the two main ones in Canada are the Canadian Federal Data Privacy Regulation, which legislates personal identifiable information, and then the PIDA Act is the Personal Information Protection and Electronic Documents Act. So those are the two main regulations that basically require you guys, or require anybody that's operating commercially, to have specific plans in place to protect customer data. And if that customer data is breached, there's specific remedies in the regulation that you're required to do. And the biggest one is notify all of your customers and provide credit monitoring services. And if you look at how we gauge that exposure, say if you have 2,000 clients, and then at an average record of about $125 to provide this, you can see where the claims can grow really quickly. The only other one I wanted to bring up is the GDPR. This is the European version of the PIDA Act in Canada. It's much stricter, and the only reason I bring it up is because if you have any business activity in Europe, or you're doing any advertising in Europe, you need to make sure that you're aware of what their compliance regulations are, because they're very strict. Excuse me, they're even stricter than in Canada. So I always like just to kind of be aware of the regulatory environment that you're operating within if you're doing any kind of marketing or any type of business, because the standards do change depending on the region that you're in. All right, I'm going to go over some basic main coverage groups, because one thing that I'd like to kind of dispel in terms of a myth is cyber insurance is not a single product. So different insurance companies will offer different levels of coverage. So if anybody tells you they have cyber insurance, well, that's not really telling me what they actually are covered for. So I like to kind of break it down. Again, at the beginning of the presentation, we talked about first-party coverages and third-party coverages. We're seeing insurance companies, offer some limited type coverages on the third-party side. So maybe offering some expense costs, like a sublimit, like, hey, on your office package, we'll offer you up to $20,000 for expenses associated with a breach. There's a big difference between expenses and liability coverage, because the expenses, okay, well, they might pay you your $20,000 to provide notification to all of your customers and or employees when you've had a breach, but that's not going to do anything if you are actually sued, and the legal expenses associated with that, and any potential claim that comes out of that if that data is leaked and causes a third-party harm. It also doesn't take into consideration your own costs and expenses associated with a breach on yourself. So I just like to caution that when anybody tells you they have cyber insurance or they've sold you cyber insurance, you definitely want to dig into exactly what you're being covered for, because there's a lot of variation in it. So the main one, when you actually buy a cyber insurance policy, you're 100% of the time you're going to see this type of coverage. And this is the main one for privacy protection and cyber liability. And this is essentially covers the cost to defend and resolve claims about handling PI, so personal identifying information, confidential corporate information, negligence, violation of privacy consumer protection laws like PIDA. I'm not saying that correctly. Yeah. So again, this is your one where you get breached, and then you have a duty to notify, or you've been identified by one of your customers that something has come from you guys is now impacting them. So this is the type of policy that's going to cover your legal expenses and costs associated with that privacy breach. Hacker and virus damage. This is the first party type coverage of that. So how do I get, my systems are completely shut down. I can't get into them anymore. Now I have to hire an IT person to come in and reconstitute all this data, figure out what even happened, and then get me back up on my feet again. That's what we would call first party coverage, and that's generally going to be covered under a specific section under the policy, not covered under the privacy protection and cyber liability aspect. Online liability, this is getting more into like defamation and libel. So, you are somebody, an employee of yours in your organization is, putting all these nasty things about a competitor or a client online, and they come back and launch a lawsuit, defamation lawsuit against you. There's policies, cyber liabilities that cover that type of exposure. We see it more so, in like content development type companies, like social media companies, that sort of thing. They would have a much higher exposure to this because they are much higher duty to provide, those type of making sure you're not stealing other people's information and making sure the information you're putting out there is valid. Breach costs, again, is getting into the expenses that you're going to incur in the event of breach. So again, reconstituting data, investigation, providing that cost of credit monitoring to third parties. That's all kind of covered in a breach cost, which can be separated out from the other one that I identified earlier. It's just these are certain things that you want to really make sure that are covered, especially this would coming in conjunction with the liability. The breach cost and liability should really kind of go together. And then, like any other business, property, sorry, a store, a contractor, any type of company would generally have business interruption insurance. However, that business interruption insurance is generally triggered by a loss to your property, like a physical loss, like rain, fire, what have you. Where cyber is not really actually impacting physical property, like, your tables and chairs or your building, that sort of thing. The trigger for it is a cyber event. But you can see if, your business is completely reliant on a website, or, you're an online store, or you're offering some sort of solution to a third party that they require access to your systems. If they can't access your systems, then that's the same thing as having your restaurant burn down and have nobody be able to operate. So there's business interruption coverage that's available under cyber policies as well. And then again, the biggest one is the cyber ransom and cyber deception. So this is, you'll hear a term called social engineering. What social engineering is those are those cryptic emails that you get that your spidey sense may be up, but it looks good, and you've looked at everything and you think, okay, well, maybe this is to do with something that I'm aware of. And then as soon as you click on a link, they're in, right? So that's what social engineering is, getting you to do something that I want you to do that is for a malintent. The ransomware is pretty easy to describe, because again, that's somebody has got into your systems, locked out your information, or are threatening to release information unless they get paid a certain amount of money. And yes, insurance companies do pay these ransoms. Sometimes they're not paying them as much as they used to anymore, because it's just kind of exasperating the problem. Once they know that, and like, it is scary. I've heard some interesting situations about this, that like how professional these organizations can be. Like, they'll have customer service lines to make sure that, oh, did you make sure you got all your information back and everything was good after they've received their payment? So the insurance companies know which ones that they will deal with and which ones that they won't deal with. So they'll just make the assumption, okay, it's going to cost us $20,000 and we trust this organization exactly to give us back that information. So we're going to pay this ransom, but this ransom over here, we're not going to pay that because we don't know who the actor is. We don't know if we're going to get our money back, and we don't know if we're going to get our data, or they're just going to do it again. So they might be in a situation where, sorry, we're just going to have to reconstitute what we have and start from scratch. So those are really the main two sources of where we're seeing the majority of claims come from, and it's cyber and social engineering.
So quick question. So
Yeah.
when it comes to insurance companies, is it do you specialize in this type of insurance, or does most insurance companies offer this, or this makes sense, but I've never thought about this on a corporate kind of level.
Yeah.
Just about even ask for their own business. So is this something that everybody has, or is this what you specialize in?
So it's one of those things where it's a newer product, so there's not a lot of general expertise in this field. Most brokers should be aware of it and should be able to speak to it. So, but there's definitely brokers that have taken more time to develop an expertise internally in it. It's certainly something that we identified and definitely got ourselves educated on this type of product. From an insurer standpoint, it is still what we would consider a specialty type product. So it's not always just something that you can have added to your office office package or your general liability package. Like I was saying earlier, some companies like the Avivas and the Intacts of the world, they do offer maybe an extension endorsement or some sort of enhanced coverages to give you some level of protection. But the only way to have a true full suite of cyber liability policy is to go through a specialized insurance carrier. And then, like I said, the expertise on the brokerage side is really dependent upon how much time and effort. It's honestly the fastest growing insurance product in the world right this second. And it's more likely for you to suffer a cyber attack than it is for your building to burn down.
Right.
So just trying to kind of change that perspective of this. Yeah. So what can you do to help manage this risk? So why does cyber risk management matter? Well, most attacks are avoidable if the organization has a strong security policy and posture. The other aspect, and I keep coming back to this, is their regulatory requirements. So legislation like PIPEDA expects Canadian organizations to have protocols in place to protect sensitive data. So with that requirement comes a higher liability exposure for you, because if the expectation is that you're managing that, you can be held much more negligent if you're not doing it. Then how can you mitigate the risk? So you want to make cybersecurity part of the organization's corporate culture. It needs to essentially pretty much have an individual that is responsible for it, that is constantly making sure your policies are updated, making sure staff are trained on how to do, how to identify potential emails, how to identify potential situations that could lead to a cyber attack. So awareness programs and training programs are very important. Strengthen contracts with vendors and business associates. As you know, like I said earlier, you can expose your business associates and your business associates can expose you to these. So making sure that you have good contractual relationships with them, and especially if you're sharing any sort of data back and forth, that that they have good policies and you have good policies to protect each other. Identify and classify the types of information collected and stored in the organization. So you might have tiered safety, like something that's non-personally identifiable, obviously has a lower duty of care for you in terms of how much protection you want to put on it. But if you're have bank statements and people's personal health information, well, there's going to need to be a higher level of care and duty to protect that information. So understanding what types of information you are actually storing is really, really important as well. Collect and retain minimum amount of personal information. So don't collect any more information than you need to. Some people are willing to give you everything, but if you don't need it, delete it, don't keep it. Review and update existing data security policies, plans, and procedures. This is generally not something that, unless you have an internal IT expert, that you're going to be able to handle internally. We always even to get cyber insurance, the application can be complicated, and we generally would recommend that you would have a security consultant come in and talk if you're starting from scratch.
So I was going to ask, is that something you guys provide, or it's like a third party, they would provide it personally themselves?
It would be a third party.
Yeah. Okay.
Now, we can obviously offer suggestions on who we would recommend for consultants and whatnot, but from the insurance perspective, we're involved at this step about setting up what would be best practices for risk management from a high level, and then providing the insurance solutions, and then we get engaged on the claims side in terms of the biggest thing with claims on the cyber front is the immediacy of how quickly you have to report it. So it's not like, oh, well, I'll get to that tomorrow or whatnot. The quicker that you can let us know that there's an event going on, the easier and the quicker they can prove that.
It's like a missing person.
Exactly.
Yeah.
First 24, it's very, very important.
It's a good
And that's why these adjusters and the emergency consultants are 24/7. So if there's a breach 2 a.m. in the morning, you have a number to call. Conduct continual risk assessments, consider ways to avoid and mitigate risks identified. So administrative safeguards, physical safeguards, because not many people have servers on a site anymore. Most people have their data hosted in the cloud, but if you do have your data hosted locally, then making sure everything from just security systems and locked doors to help prevent those safeguards. The technical safeguards are more to do with your firewalls and your antivirus and that sort of thing. prepare for data security events, so have a plan in place. If something happens, make sure, like any type of disaster plan, make sure you have a plan in place that what you're going to do and how you're going to attack it. And then finally, you can mitigate your risk with cyber insurance. At the end of the day, we want to make sure that you have all your risk policies in place, and then at the end of the day, if something does happen, the insurance policy be able to recoup losses is ideal. So other than that, I just have a couple claims examples that I threw up here. Sometimes I find they're easier to kind of get an idea of where the types of claims are coming from. So I just picked a couple random. This is just a consulting firm. Laptop belonging to human resource consulting firm is lost. The data on it includes names, addresses, social security numbers of hundreds of contract employees. Even though the information is never disseminated, the consulting firm is required to notify the affected employee and offer them credit monitoring services. So this is based on the regulation. That doesn't matter if somebody has actually used that information for a bad purpose. The mere fact that it was released triggers the regulation. So that's why the expenses and the cyber liability component of it is so very important. Management consulting firm placed several consultants at a client site during a project. I'm missing a word on that. Can you move the thing over? I think that sentence doesn't read properly. Oh yeah, or maybe it's just a typo. Placed several consultants at a client site during a project. One of the consultants inadvertently circulates a confidential memo to an extensive email list, including internal and external recipients. The client is sued. So, you've ever done the reply all by accident?
I've had dreams about it.
Yes, I think we all do.
Nightmares.
Nightmares for sure.
Yeah.
Here's another couple of examples for an accounting firm. I've actually had dealt with a claim with an accounting firm, and they lost all their billing data for 6 months, so they didn't even know how much money they were out because they couldn't constitute that data back. So
Terrible.
it's crazy. So a backup drive containing the name, address, social security numbers of all the tax preparation clients of an accounting firm is lost because the drive contained personally identifiable information. Each client has to be contacted. So another situation of expenses. Accounting firm's computer software is hacked, compromising payment information of hundreds of clients. The firm is required to absorb the cost of notifying all the affected clients and the cost to issue new credit cards to all of those clients. Computer system of an accounting firm is hacked. Social security numbers and other financial information from tax returns of several thousand customers is compromised, as is the employee information from all of its regular and seasonal employees. The firm must notify all the affected parties and provide credit monitoring. So those are more of the privacy breach type examples. It's pretty easy to dawn an example of an extortion threat, essentially. Like I mentioned before, you just come in one day, you'll have a black screen, and it'll say, and you'll have a message that says, you pay this amount of money by this amount of time.
Just like the movies.
Just like the movies. Just like the movies. And that's the end of my presentation. So with that, I will open it up to the floor with any specific questions. Just our team here. We're local Bedford business. Business been around since 1947. Under current ownership since 1975. We specialize in both commercial and personal insurance. And here's our commercial team. So I guess maybe I should have this at the beginning.
Right.
So is there any questions from the group? Yeah, that's true. So
That was actually a lot of really great information. Sorry, I took a second to get my mic on. Thank you so much for that. You just opened my eyes to a bunch of stuff that I didn't think was possible. So that was amazing. I'd like to say I have questions, but I can't even conceive of what they would be right now.
Well, what we'll do too is, I know it's hard in these presentations just to immediately come up. We'll leave some contact information and just reach out to us with any specific questions. Like with you guys, you do store, you are going to have the personal information. And so I don't know what happens from a corporate level. For example, like the real estate association, you guys have your professional liability, and that's generally a group group E&O policy.
Yeah.
But I don't know if that specific policy offers any type of cyber, or if that's all dependent on the individual independent
Individual, yeah,
Yeah,
none of this.
so,
Be interesting to approach our board on the association itself. Yeah.
for sure.
100%. Perhaps that could be, something that attached or.
See, they probably would not attach it just because each individual brokerage is gonna have its different degrees of risk. Some people are gonna have a great security policies and be, and some people are not gonna be as such,
Right.
where the professional liability, since you all have to have, you know, a certain level of designation, certain level of education, they can kind of do a group plan for that. Because I actually did years ago look at the E&O plan for real estate agents for Nova Scotia. The company that insures that actually is a big cyber insurance provider as well. So, but again, it's probably just gonna be more so an individual basis just because of your own controls and security controls come into play. So, but yeah, it's certainly something that we can do. We can do it, look at groups, we can look at individual brokerages. I don't know how your structure works, as if there's any independent contractors as well. Independent contractors, you know, again, could be an issue where you have to be your own as well. So but it's definitely something that if you take away one thing from this meeting, is just take a look at what you got.
Yeah, that was kind of like the plan when Tanya and I organized this, was just to bring awareness to it. Right, because a lot of people, like Sean said in the presentation, aren't aware of the extent of what cyber.
Right.
And I find a lot of the feedback, because when we first started selling the product, it really wasn't widely picked up because people just didn't think it would happen to them. And, you know, it happens to Target. I'm not Target. Why is a hacker going to target me? I only do $150,000 in revenue a year, but that's not what the thought process is. They do these splatter shot campaigns where they can target 1 million businesses in one shot. Takes them 5 minutes.
Oh, look at them.
All they need
Yeah.
is 0.5%, and they've recouped their costs,
That's it.
Right.
So
right? So
Well-
that's why every small business is at risk as well.
Well, small business that happened to, a general email, someone just, like a very, very small business, a general email. And next thing you know, it went directly into their bank account and took out $5,700, which for a small company, that's quite a lot of money, right? That they'll never get back. Yeah.
And so you have different, obviously, plans for,
Yeah.
depending on small, medium-sized businesses versus like Nova Scotia Power.
Yeah, exactly. So how, like, when we're trying to measure your level of exposure, we would generally start at how many, between all of your employees and all your customers, how many files do you have? How many
Okay, that
customers
makes
do you have? How
sense.
many employees do you have?
Data, all data.
Because then we can start like breaking that down and say, okay, maybe the not the worst case scenario, but most likely scenario for you would be if you had a data breach. Well, now we can say a data breach is roughly X amount of dollars per record, and you have X amount of records. So we would recommend you having at least this
That makes
minimum
sense.
level of coverage. Now, when we get into the cyber market, because the growing amount of claims, pricing is certainly going up. It's much higher than it used to be when it first rolled out. They're underwriting it very strictly. So if you have no protocols in place, no security plans, you will not get insurance. The other thing is they're issuing a lot lower limits for things like extortion and social engineering. So you may have $1 million for your privacy liability, but you may only have $50,000.
You have some accountability as a company itself. You have to
Exactly.
Put in there.
Controls in place to try and limit your
Because if
exposure.
you're
as
not,
much
it's
as
like,
possible.
whatever.
Yeah,
You're
it's like,
gonna
Exactly.
exactly. It's like you don't maintain your building.
It's like host insurance.
Exactly. And you have your roof,
Yeah.
damaged and it leaks. Well, you
Right.
might not have coverage because you didn't maintain it properly. So, yeah, it's a interesting topic. It's people are starting to grasp it more now because it is starting to trickle out more small businesses, local businesses.
I think the chamber of commerce could go and do a presentation. That
So
type of thing would
we-
be up.
We are the affinity partner for the Halifax Chamber of Commerce
perfect.
for business insurance. So yeah, we've done similar presentations,
great.
cyber and, but yeah, it's probably time for a new one.
Yeah.
Construction industry.
Construction, Nova Scotia,
Yeah.
contractors, everything.
Mhm.
This is pervasive. Anybody who has a cell phone or a laptop is exposed.
Especially that, yes, you think more too, because people are mobile. And
Yeah.
even like, and and working from home, like it's a
And-
whole nother level,
And using open Wi-Fi and all that
Right.
kind of stuff.
whole
right?
nother level, yeah.
Well, you hit the nail on the head there. It like really came to a head during the pandemic.
Yes.
Because all these organizations that didn't necessarily have work from home policies, VPNs and all that kind of stuff, were just sending people home because we gotta work. And they were just using their own personal laptops and it created a massive exposure.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that was a really good point. Work from home, provides a huge exposure for businesses and their cyber policies. So yeah, with that, if there's any other questions, we'll leave our contact information. And if anybody wants to speak specifically about their own business or their own coverage, we're happy to help and advise as best we can. And yeah, I hope this was informative.
Thank you so much, really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And help yourself to the muffins and
Muffins and
coffee, except for
coffee.
the people online. I don't know.
Come quick, come quick.
Come quick.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
That's been fun.
Thank you.
Oh, there's one chat here.
Oh.
Make sure-
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, no problem at all, Shelley. You guys take care now.
Like big accounting firm.